Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take some really complex, sometimes kind of weird, but always fascinating material and, well, we break it down for you, make it usable.
Yeah, and today we're jumping into a session from the Seth Material that's it's surprisingly down to earth in places. It feels less like homework and more like, I don't know, eavesdropping on a really interesting, maybe slightly bizarre chat.
Definitely bizarre in the best way. So the source for today's deep dive is specific. It's session 40 of the early sessions, book 1 of Seth Material. And this was recorded way back Wednesday, April 1st, 1964. Started at 9 p.m. sharp.
April Fool's Day, interestingly enough.
Huh, yeah, maybe fitting. So our goal here, as always, is to give you a shortcut. We want you to get the key insights, the really juicy bits from this pretty unique document without needing to wade through everything yourself.
And just a quick heads up before we really get into this deep dive, like all of them, it's going to be distributed completely free. You'll find it on all the major platforms. It's purely for educational purposes, sharing the ideas.
Right, so let's set the scene. Jane Roberts, Seth calls her Ruburt, and her husband Joseph. They're doing this session, and apparently Jane was feeling pretty good that day.
Yeah, the notes mentioned she'd had a good nap. She was feeling enthusiastic about sorting out their living space. So much so, it says she actually forgot to be nervous about the session, which is quite a state to be in.
And you can bet Seth picked up on that energy right away. He knows how to make an entrance, doesn't he? He kicks things off with this, mock dramatic statement.
Oh, yeah. He says he, quote, took a preliminary peek into your establishment earlier this evening and departed in dismay, in fear, in terror.
Sounds serious, but then Joseph asks, why? Why the terror?
And Seth just deadpans it. It's pure timing. He says, well, I certainly would not want Ruburt throwing furniture at me. Then quickly adds, you understand, of course, that I am speaking of mock terror. When Rubert's resentment finally flares, that is no time for me to be around.
It's brilliant. It just perfectly sets this tone, right? You've got this profound cosmic wisdom, but it's all wrapped up in these very personal, kind of sarcastic, but ultimately really affectionate observations about their daily lives.
Exactly. It grounds everything immediately. We're talking metaphysics, but we start with, household arguments and pent-up frustration. Super relatable.
Okay, so let's dive into that first part then, the whole domestic situation.
Right, so Seth jumps right into the psychological stuff, the stress they've been under. They were thinking about moving, needed more space. And Jane had just come up with this idea. What if they shared Joseph's art studio?
And Seth's reaction.
Immediate green light. He calls it an excellent one. But what's really interesting is why he hadn't suggested it himself before.
Oh, it wasn't just that he hadn't thought of it.
Nope. According to Seth, it was all about Jane's, or Rubert's, internal state. He says he couldn't bring it up earlier because Ruburt was feeling this deep guilt. Guilt about wanting more space, guilt about maybe not being happy with what they had.
Yeah. Wow, okay, so the guilt was blocking the practical solution.
Pretty much. And Seth connects that guilt directly to something physical Joseph had noticed. He says, quote, resentment had a lot to do with Rubert's banging around.
Banging around, like literally making noise.
Yeah, clumsiness, noise. But Seth clarifies, it wasn't resentment at Joseph. It was, and this is the key part, resentment because he felt guilty for not being satisfied.
Okay, let's unpack that for a second. So the inner self needs something more space. The conscious mind labels that need as selfish or ungrateful, which creates guilt.
Right, and that conflict between the need and the guilt, it festers. It turns into this low-level resentment. But since the ego won't let it out directly,
it comes out sideways as physical actions, banging around. That makes so much sense, actually. The environment literally reflects the inner psychic static.
Exactly. And Seth even says the quality of their sessions, the communication itself, gets better when they feel secure and as settled as possible. Fixing the apartment issue wasn't just about comfort. It was about clearing the channel,
Yeah. So he backs the studio idea. Does he give any other advice about their place?
He does. He suggests they stay put, basically, unless they can make a big move, like out to the country or suburbs, since that wasn't really on the cards.
Maximize what they have.
Precisely. He says for major long-term satisfaction, they should think about enlarging the kitchen, which, is often the real hub of a home, and also figure out how to use their back room all year round.
So practical stuff. Make the existing space flow better instead of a total upheaval.
Yeah, it's about adjustments that help that inner energy flow rather than tearing everything down. Small changes, big impact.
Okay, but then we get to the really human stuff. The part that reminds you even cosmic entities notice the little annoyances. We have to talk about the neighbor.
Ah, yes. The infamous fat neighbor.
Tell us about him.
So The session notes say Jane was getting really irritated by this new guy across the way. Apparently, he had this habit of walking back and forth in front of his big picture window.
Let me guess. Fully clothed and respectable.
Huh? Nope. In his undershirt. Classic annoying neighbor behavior, right? Trivial, but it grates.
And Seth notices this.
Immediately tunes in. And this is where it gets kind of funny and validating for Jane. Seth basically says, yeah, I get it. Quote, incidentally, I share Rupert's annoyance with your fat neighbor across the way.
He shares the annoyance. That's amazing.
And I will tell you some tales about him before I am finished. Like he's saving up some cosmic gossip.
Wow. So on one hand, he's talking about the structure of reality, and on the other, he's commiserating about the guy in the undershirt across the street.
It shows his range, doesn't it? From the universal down to the hyperlocal. And it makes Ruburt feel seen, you know? Validates her very human irritation, keeps the whole thing feeling grounded and, well, kind of friendly.
Before we move on to the deeper stuff, though, there was one other bit of practical advice, right, about a different apartment.
Oh, right. Yeah, they were considering moving into an apartment owned by one of Jane's coworkers from the art gallery. Seth puts the brakes on that hard.
Calls it extremely inadvisable.
He mentions past unpleasant circumstances and warns that this coworker, as a landlady, would likely be very domineering. And this little warning, it perfectly sets up a big reveal later on. A past life connection that explains everything.
Ah, a little foreshadowing. Okay, so domestic drama set aside for now. Let's shift gears to the more metaphysical side of things.
Okay, so we've talked about the psychic static from like a bad apartment layout. Now let's zoom out and talk about the psychic foundation of reality itself. This is where Seth introduces the sixth inner sense.
The sixth sense? How does he describe it? Is it like ESP or something?
He says it's similar to what we call instincts, but it's purely a property of the inner self. It's not just biological, it's deeper. And to explain it, he uses this brilliant analogy.
And spider web.
Exactly. The spider spinning its web. He says that action is the sixth sense in its pure form. And the web itself, that's the camouflage pattern that definitely exists on your plane.
Okay, camouflage pattern. What does that mean? Is reality just a disguise?
In a way, yes. The spider is the perfect example because it doesn't have, complicated human ego or intellect getting in the way. Its web building is a direct, spontaneous expression of these inner senses. Unfiltered.
But Seth also says the spider has, complete comprehension of the universe, right? So why just a web? Why not, I don't know, a tiny skyscraper?
Huh. Good question.
Yeah.
And the answer gets to the heart of this camouflage idea. Seth says, yes, inherent in the spider and in us is this complete comprehension of the universe as a whole. But the spider only builds what's necessary for its survival within this specific camouflage. Its actions are tuned to this physical plane.
So the physical world, the camouflage, it acts like a set of rules, a framework to channel that infinite potential into something manageable, useful.
Precisely. It provides boundaries. Otherwise, if we were constantly aware of the raw, unfiltered sixth sense, reality might just dissolve into chaos every second, changing endlessly. The camouflage stabilizes things.
Okay, so we're all spiders, in a sense. We're all spinning our reality webs.
Yeah. Exactly. Seth says, you construct your own camouflage existence as the spider constructs his web. But here's the crucial difference. But you not aware of the threads.
We see the web, the finished product, the solid world around us, but we don't realize we're the ones doing the spinning. We've forgotten the threads originate inside us.
That's the idea. Every object, every sensation, it's an instant manifestation of this inner sense, just filtered and stabilized by the camouflage rules of physics and time. We're constantly weaving, but we think we just found the fabric lying around.
Mind blown. Okay, so this leads into another really interesting point he makes about ideas and completion.
Right. The power of incomplete ideas. He draws this really important distinction. A physical thing, like the spider's web or a house you build, once it's finished, it's fully manifested in the camouflage.
So it's subject to the rules, bound by physical laws, time, decay, all that.
Exactly. It's fixed.
Yeah.
But the idea behind it, especially an idea that's left incomplete in some aspects, that retains incredible power. It's not bound by physical laws in the same way. It's free from time, Seth says.
Free from time in a way the web can never be. So keeping an idea slightly open, slightly unfinished, gives it more juice, more potential.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Seth emphasizes this. The idea has at its command, then, greater and varied methods of expression, and from it, varieties of construction can be attempted. If you lock it down completely into one physical form, you limit how else it might manifest.
He uses Joseph's painting as an example, right? The one sent to the gallery.
Perfect example. He calls it evocative, precisely because it has this quality of being almost completed but not totally pinned down. It's not imprisoned, so Seth says. It continues to grow. It leaves psychic space open.
So for anyone creative or anyone developing anything really, the message is don't rush to nail everything down. Leave some room for the idea itself to breathe and evolve.
That seems to be the implication. Psychic reality loves potential. The finished thing is static in a way. The unfinished thing is alive, still attracting energy, still capable of surprising you. The idea keeps working, even after the first web is spun.
Fascinating. Okay, so we construct reality with the sixth sense, and incomplete ideas have power. What about containing ourselves within that reality?
Right, that brings us to boundaries. How do we maintain our own sense of self within this wild, spontaneous reality we're weaving? Seth introduces something called the tissue capsule.
Tissue capsule sounds biological.
Not really, despite the name. He describes it as an energy field boundary. It surrounds every living consciousness, not just us humans, on like all planes of existence. Think of it as a kind of invisible, energetic extra layer of skin.
Okay, an energy field, what's its job? Why do we need it?
Protection, mainly.
Okay.
Psychic integrity, you could say. Its first job is to keep your own inner energy controlled, stop it from just seeping away into the general camouflage field, keep it contained.
And the second job?
It guards against certain radiations. Now, he doesn't specify exactly, but presumably we're talking about psychic or energetic stuff from other planes, maybe other beings, that could be disruptive or harmful to our particular frequency or state of being.
So it keeps us. It keeps other potentially weird stuff out. Makes sense. And this capsule, is it what other beings perceive if they're not seeing our physical bodies?
That's exactly what Seth says. For some inhabitants of other planes, the capsule is all they can perceive of us. Our physical bodies, the chairs we sit on, the whole camouflage pattern, totally invisible to them. They operate on different frequencies, different rules. They just see the energy field, the capsule.
Okay, this is starting to sound a bit like concepts we might already know, like an aura, or maybe the astral body people talk about.
Seth actually addresses that head on. He says, yes, the capsule can be perceived by humans sometimes, under certain conditions, like clairvoyance. And when people do see it, they've often mistakenly called it the astral body.
Ah, so it's related, but not quite the same thing in his model.
Seems like it. He's framing it less as a double body and more as this dynamic, essential energy boundary of your current conscious existence.
Got it. Okay, so if the sixth sense builds reality and the tissue capsule contains us within it, is there a sense for interacting with the capsule itself?
There is. And that brings us to the seventh inner sense.
The seventh sense, what does that one do?
This one is all about flexibility of that boundary. The seventh sense allows for the expansion or contraction of the tissue capsule. And theoretically, Seth says, there's no limit to how much it can expand.
Whoa. So it's the sense that governs psychic reach. Expanding your awareness or maybe pulling it back in?
That's pretty much it. It's the mechanism for extending or retracting your field of consciousness, your energetic presence.
Now, I remember reading the notes for this part. This is where Seth, channeled through Jane, starts getting visibly amused, right? Like something really clicked for him or he was enjoying the implications.
Yeah, the notes describe him grinning, tapping the desk, leaning forward, clearly having a bit of fun with the concept he's about to drop. It's a massive connection, a huge leap. He gives them this fun contemplation exercise, he says, basically. Think about this expanding tissue capsule, and then think about the scientific theory of the expanding universe.
Wait, he's linking my personal energy field expanding to the entire universe expanding.
He's hinting at it. He says, for fun, think of the expanding tissue capsule in terms of, or in connection with, the theory of your expanding universe. It's like this playful but profound suggestion.
And then he pulls back, says he's saving the details.
Exactly. He calls them these little tidbits he's saving for later, but encourages them to chew on the idea as excellent exercise. It's classic. Seth drop a reality-bending bombshell, then tell you to just ponder it for fun.
But the implication is huge. Is the universe's expansion just a collective expression of the seventh sense? A massive shared expansion of consciousness boundaries?
It forces you to ask that, doesn't it? Is the universe just a larger consciousness doing what we can do on a smaller scale with our own capsules? It blurs the line between inner and outer space completely.
Yeah, it really does. Okay, so if space itself is tied to consciousness in these capsules, that must have some serious implications for how we think about travel. especially space travel.
Well, absolutely. And this leads directly into maybe Seth's most famous and funniest critique of our standard physical worldview. Why our ideas about space travel are, well, fundamentally flawed and kind of comical.
Right. He starts by reminding them about the purpose of this physical plane, doesn't he?
Yeah, he reiterates that it's a training place. We're here to learn how to manipulate energy. And we learn by interacting with what looks like a stable reality based on cause and effect.
But that cause and effect, that's the camouflage again.
Exactly. He calls it a necessary camouflage. It provides structure so we can learn. But underneath, what's the real engine of reality?
Let me guess. Spontaneity.
You got it. Only spontaneity, Seth says. The camouflage, the laws of physics. Time, they're like guardrails to manage that raw, instantaneous creation, keep it from being total chaos.
Okay, so if the fundamental reality is spontaneity and space and time are just the guardrails, the camouflage, then trying to travel vast distances within that camouflage.
It becomes inherently problematic and, from Seth's perspective, laughable.
Why laughable specifically?
Because the whole concept of destination breaks down. He puts it so bluntly. The idea of destination in these terms is laughable. Every place is one place. You do the dividing and the separations.
We're the ones creating the distance by buying into the camouflage rules. Outside those rules, everything is just here, now.
That's the implication. We impose the grid of space and time onto a fundamentally unified reality. So trying to cross that grid seems absurd if you understand the underlying unity.
And this is where his famous comments about flying saucers come in, right? Why he finds them so amusing.
Yes. The session notes even say he was rocking back and forth in Jane's chair, clearly entertained. He says, I am laughing because they fly through, in your terms, the very core of what you presume to call solid Earth, which is not solid to them at all.
Because solid Earth is just part of our camouflage pattern. If you're not tuned to that pattern, it's not a barrier. You just pass through.
Seems so. It makes our whole framework for thinking about interstellar travel, propulsion, speed, avoiding collisions, look kind of quaint, doesn't it? If the obstacles aren't even solid from another perspective.
So, are these flying saucer beings traveling across space as we know it at all?
Seth makes a key distinction here. He talks about horizontal travel versus vertical travel.
Okay, what's the difference?
Horizontal travel is what our science imagines moving across distances within our current plane of reality, our camouflage universe. Finding other beings who exist under the same basic rules, even if they're light years away.
And vertical travel.
That's changing planes,
Yeah.
shifting dimensions or frequencies. Seth says the inhabitants of these flying saucers, they're not doing horizontal travel. They're operating vertically. They're not on our plane, which is why they can zip through our solid ground.
Which means looking for them with, like, telescopes and radio signals based on our physics is fundamentally missing the point.
Pretty much. We're looking on the wrong level, using the wrong assumptions. And this ties back to Jane and Joseph's own experiences. Seth points out that the intense feeling and information Ruburt got during this very part of the session, that wasn't an invasion by Seth.
It was an extension.
An extension on Ruburt's part, Seth clarifies. Ruburt's awareness expanded, using psychological time, to include Seth's perspective, this other self-experience.
Yeah.
That's the real value, the real frontier, not clock time or physical distance.
So the future of discovery isn't necessarily bigger rockets.
According to Seth, no. He predicts that the sheer impossibility of practical, long-distance space travel, because of the time elements involved in the camouflage universe itself, will eventually force scientists to look elsewhere.
Towards
ESP and telepathy. He paints this almost comical picture of a totally conventional scientist hitting a wall with physics, who, out of pure desperation, finally makes the breakthrough into non-physical communication or travel. Because it's simpler. It bypasses the camouflage rules.
And there's a warning attached to future space ventures, too, isn't there?
A fascinating one. He cautions that we might launch a mission aiming for a distant star, a horizontal journey, but actually end up somewhere else entirely.
Quote, "It is very possible that you might end up in what you intend as a space venture only to discover that you have traveled to another plane."
But at first, you will not know the difference. Our assumptions, our belief in the camouflage are so strong, we'd mistake a dimensional shift for just arriving at a weird new planet.
Wow. That is a trip. Okay, so after blowing their minds with the comedy of space travel, Seth brings it back down to earth a bit, right?
Yep.
Back to their lives.
Yeah, he circles back to the personal stuff, which is great because it grounds all these massive concepts. First, he gives Joseph a pat on the back about a portrait prize he'd won recently.
What does he say?
Basically that even though the art world can be full of, stupidity and ignorance and idiotic, unfounded pride, which, let's be honest, sounds familiar. Good work does still get recognized sometimes. He tells Joseph to give the institutions credit for that when it happens.
So acknowledge the system isn't all bad, even if it's flawed, and trust your own work.
Exactly. And that ties into more advice about psychic energy management. He tells Joseph to be careful about projecting his own fears and irritations upon others.
Like, don't assume everyone else is out to get you or critique your work just because you're feeling insecure.
Right. Be on guard, Seth says, be aware, but hardly any to be up in arms. Don't waste energy on aggressive defensiveness based on your own projections.
Which leads us neatly back to that coworker's apartment they were thinking of renting.
And the big reveal. Seth finally explains why it would have been such a terrible idea, energetically speaking.
Sure.
And surprise, surprise, it's a past life thing.
Okay, give us the details. This sounds juicy.
It is, Seth confirms, straight up. In a past life, Ruburt Jane was Joseph's son. Both were painters, and they lived in Denmark in a town called Treve, which Seth helpfully adds had a population between 5,000 and 15,000.
Denmark, okay. And the coworker, where does she fit in?
She was right there with them. She worked on one of Joseph's farms back then, and she wasn't exactly happy about it.
Ah, resentment again.
Bingo. Seth says the reason she'd be domineering as a landlady now is because of that old dynamic. Quote, she resented this very much, meaning working on the farm, and she also resented your son, who was Ruburt Jane.
Oh, wow. So moving into her apartment would just reactivate all that ancient baggage. The power dynamic would flip and all that old resentment would surface. Yikes.
Yeah, definitely yikes. Avoid, avoid, avoid. But Seth doesn't just leave it there. He adds some colorful details about Joseph's character in that Danish lifetime.
This is the old reprobate part.
That's the one. He calls Joseph the old reprobate, but you can tell it's said with, like, a cosmic chuckle. Total affection, zero judgment.
So what earned him that title?
Well, Seth mentions the rather hilarious incident where Joseph, as the father, would apparently take over your son's mistresses when you got the chance.
Oh, my goodness. Okay,
Yeah.
definitely reprobate territory there.
Right. Just classic Seth laying out these very human, very flawed historical details matter-of-factly, almost like sharing amusing family stories.
Yeah.
No shame, no blame, just this is what happened. This was part of the energy.
And there was something about rent collection, too, related to the coworker.
Ah, yes, the pièce de résistance of the past life gossip. Seth mentions the specific case with this farm worker, the potential landlady of Joseph, taking some rent out through flesh when the cash was not forthcoming.
Whoa. Okay, yeah, probably best not to rent from her then. Good call, Seth.
Understatement of the year. But again, notice the tone. Seth recounts this with amusement, highlighting the relaxed, non-judgmental vibe of the sessions, even when dealing with some pretty eyebrow-raising past behavior. It really emphasizes the idea that personalities evolve, but echoes remain.
Okay, so past lives explained.
Yeah.
What about tools for the present? They used a pendulum sometimes, right? Did Seth comment on that?
He did. He gives a quick clarification. He says the pendulum is reliable, but only for specific things.
Such as
Serious matters involving your present time, and for accessing the subconscious mind through what he calls unconscious muscular speech. Basically, tapping into what your immediate subconscious already knows.
But it has limits. It's not the same as the sessions.
Definitely not. Seth is very clear on this. He says quite firmly, Rupert's subconscious on its own is simply not capable of arriving at the knowledge that you are getting in our sessions. The pendulum gets you subconscious info. The sessions tap into something much deeper, much broader.
Good distinction to make. And finally, he wraps up with one last personal, practical bit of reassurance.
Yeah, the pregnancy question. Apparently, there had been some anxiety or maybe hope around whether Ruburt was pregnant. Seth confirms, nope, not pregnant.
What was causing the feelings or symptoms then?
A mix of things, according to Seth. Some seasonal physical changes, a stressful phone call involving Joseph's mother and niece who was pregnant, and tying it all back Joseph's own anger about children.
How did Joseph's anger affect Jane and Ruburt?
Seth says Joseph's anger inadvertently raised Rupert's hidden hopes of a larger apartment and then dashed them, which just fueled that same old resentment about space and feeling stuck that started the whole session.
Wow, it really does come full circle. The need for space, the guilt, the resentment, it was all interwoven.
Perfectly interwoven.
Yeah.
And Seth finishes on that practical note again, telling them if they do enlarge the kitchen, they should really try to get that window overlooking the river. Cosmology and home improvement, all in one package. ### outro. Key takeaways and final thought.
Okay, what a session. This deep dive into session 40 really gave us a bit of everything, didn't it? From household friction to the nature of reality itself.
Absolutely. Key takeaways for me. That connection between guilt and resentment manifesting physically. Reality is this necessary camouflage over pure spontaneity, and the idea that incomplete concepts actually hold more dynamic energy.
And definitely Seth's whole cosmic comedy routine about space travel. The idea that destination is laughable because everywhere is already here, and we're the ones drawing the lines. True exploration is inward, using psychological time.
But, the most intriguing bit might actually come after the main session in the notes, Joseph added. It connects directly back to that seventh inner sense we talked about.
Oh, what happened?
Right after the session ended, Joseph, who apparently almost never experienced the weird physical sensations Jane often did during channeling, suddenly felt something totally new.
Which was?
His hands felt fat.
Fat hands. Seriously.
Seriously. He described this swollen, thick, kind of alien feeling, especially in his fingers and knuckles. Lasted several minutes, and it was the exact same sensation Jane Ruburt often reported feeling during deep trance or channeling states.
Whoa, so he felt what she feels.
Exactly. And Jane's immediate thought, recorded in the notes, was, maybe this is it. Maybe this strange, fat hands feeling is a glimpse of the seventh inner sense activating. That ability to feel the expansion or change in the tissue capsule, the body's energy boundary.
So the energy of the session might have actually stimulated that sense, however briefly, in both of them. Joseph got a taste of sensing his own energy field shift.
That's the fascinating possibility they considered. That this seemingly random physical symptom was actually a tiny peek into sensing their own multidimensional nature.
Okay, that leads perfectly into our final thought for you, the listener. If something as simple and weird as fat hands could be a sign of perceiving your own tissue capsule, your own energy boundary flexing, what about you?
Think about it. What common, everyday feeling, maybe a sudden tingling, a weird sense of lightness or heaviness, that feeling of being bigger or smaller than your physical body, for a split second, what might that be?
Could one of those fleeting, unexplained physical sensations actually be your first brush with an inner sense you didn't even know you had? Something to ponder, maybe.
Definitely. Now, before we wrap up, we absolutely have to acknowledge the source of all this incredible, mind-bending material. We've been diving deep into the Seth material.
And huge credit goes to the publisher New Awareness Network for keeping this work available.
We really, really encourage you, if this sparked your interest, to explore the Seth material books for yourself. The early sessions is a fantastic place to start. You can find these books and learn more by visiting the New Awareness Network website and bookstore. That's at sethcenter.com for their early sessions.
It's truly fascinating stuff.
It really is. And so we'll sign off today using Seth's own closing words from this very session, session 40, spoken to Jane and Joseph.
He said, "My pie eyes, a fond and most hearty good night. I've had fun with you in my fashion."
Good night, everyone. Keep exploring.